heads to the polls in December, ruling party, the National Patriotic Party, has put forward Vice President Mahamudu Bawumia as a presidential candidate, while the opposition, the National Democratic Congress, has nominated former President John Mahama. Now, both parties have recently launched their election manifestos outlining economic plans for the country amid the region's ongoing program with the IMF. Jervin Naidoo, who's political analyst at Oxford Economics Africa, has more detail on this and more. Jervin, thank you so much for your time and good afternoon.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, Jervin, let's talk about the economic policies of the NPP and the NDC and how they do compare and how that could have an impact on the Ghanaian economy.
Yeah, no, that's obviously been the core part of the manifesto launches over the last couple of weeks. So the NPP, who are currently ruling, and the NDC, who are the opposition, they both have very similar manifestos. They both target similar big-ticket items like improving the economy, getting more jobs, improving security, those kind of things. The big difference is in how they go about it. So, for example, with the NPP, Mr. Bawumia's key policies around his 14 commitments, his 14 grand goals which he wishes to achieve, like creating jobs, improving the forex in the country. So to go about this, they are targeting very specific things, and I think this comes from being in power. They've been in power since the IMF assistance programs have come in, so they understand the inner workings of the economy. Not to say that the opposition doesn't, but they're targeting to achieve a lot of these financial goals is cutting government expenditure by something like 30%. They haven't been clear on what they're going to cut, but likelihood they're going to cut a lot of public programs, which is not going to make people happy, but that's probably what they're looking at. And they're also looking at a lot of tax amnesties to people and to companies, which on one end will help encourage businesses, but they haven't really clarified it. The one thing I must say about the NPP's manifesto, when I read it up against the NDC's in some of the research that we've done, it's a lot more of a wish list. It doesn't really have to meet practical goals. Whereas then if we talk about the NDC's one, it's a little bit more practical and concrete, if we want to use that kind of wording. I think the key takeaway there is that Mr. Mahama has this policy. I think it's quite an interesting policy. It's called the 24-hour economy, in which he aims to make sure the Ghanaian economy runs all the time. To do this, he wants to amend working legislations so that you could work in 3 8-hour shifts, so businesses can operate all the time around the clock, which I think is quite innovative and interesting, but then you're going to have to balance out some of your issues in terms of workers' rights, labor rights, those kind of things with unions. And the very interesting thing, I'm sure some of your viewers would know that Ghana is quite reliant on its gold and oil industries, but under Mr. Mahama, he actually would like to pivot slightly and focus on palm oil and push Ghana to be becoming the largest palm oil producer in West Africa. It's a little bit ambitious. They're quite far back behind Cote d'Ivoire and Nigeria, but it's quite interesting. So to sum it up, they both have similar policies. They're just going about it in different ways. And I would say the NDC is a bit more concrete on its plans compared to the NPP.
Let's talk about, the current political landscape that meets these manifestos here and, what that could do for a potential winner. Who could potentially then win based on what we've spoken about?
Yeah, so it's going to be close. So historically in Ghana, since the reintroduction of multi-party democracy, no party has won more than 2 consecutive terms. So the NPP are currently in that second term. And according to some of the polling in Ghana, which is also fairly new, polling as a concept is just generally, I think, quite new to the continent, Africa. It's obviously used quite a lot in Europe and the States. But most of the polls have the NDC winning a very close race. And according to our own forecast here at Oxford, which we've been advising to clients and media, we think the NDC are going to win, but it's going to be a very, very close race. The political climate it's also quite volatile. You have lots of politicking, politicians are there, this one calling this one that name and saying you did this and you did this. So, yeah, so we think, and according to my analyst view, the NDC are going to win, but it's going to be a close one.
We know that Ghana is well within the IMF program, economic reforms also, right in the middle of those. Would a change in government affect any of that progress?
So the NDC like to say that if they're in power, they're going to do a lot. But to be honest, Ghana's hands are tied. They've already signed up quite a few agreements with the IMF to meet certain targets, fiscal targets. And as your viewers would know, as seen in the recent protests in Kenya, when those targets are set in from the IMF, it's very difficult for the government to make changes. So even if the NDC comes in, they're going to have to work with those IMF changes. And if they want to, fund new projects, they're going to have to find ways, creative ways within government to generate new income, because the IMF protocols are quite strict, and Ghana went through quite a difficult financial time. So there's lots of politicking, especially on the ND side, saying, no, we'll get rid of the IMF programs. But realistically, it's not going to change that much.
And then, Jervin, I must ask you here, we have spoken about the NPP and the NDC here, dominant parties within Ghana here. Is there a chance that a third party could emerge, an independent candidate can come through and really break through this election?
Yeah, we actually get that question quite often from some of our clients who query about Ghana. So Ghana, like I mentioned, there are two parties that dominate. And in Ghana, they use the electoral system called first past the post. So whoever gets the simple majority of 50% wins, right? But the interesting thing is that Alan Kiramata, who is the former trade minister, he actually belonged to the NPP and he was a minister under current President Nana Akufo-Addo. He left the party and formed his own party called the Movement for Change. The Movement for Change. And it looks like he's going to get around 4 to 5% of the vote. He's quite popular in the Ashanti region, the southern part of Ghana, which is an NPP stronghold. So even if he takes even 2% or 3%, he's going to force a second round of elections. He won't be part of the second round, but he's going to force a second round, and he's going to be a big player because he's going to take a lot of votes off the NPP and also off people who are a bit tired of the system. Ghana, similar to Mauritius, we've had two political parties that have dominated for a very long time. So people are also getting a bit tired of the same system over and over again. So while he won't win the presidency, Alan Kiramata, he's going to do a lot to influence the final outcome.
Well, we look forward to having you cover that for us, Jervin. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That was Jervin Naidoo, political analyst at Oxford Economics Africa.